gap that's over here that's starting to fill, and it looks like it's filled it in the pre-market. This gap here, like usually when you get a gap like that, that's like a suction point. So we've got, weakness in the market. We're down like 1.5 points, but we've got like multiple levels of support here that should hold at least momentarily at the open. So you have this gap that needed to be filled anyways. So now we've come back and filled that gap. Good morning, everybody. We're sitting on the 9 EMA on the daily chart. So this is like going to be like a little bit of a trickiness at the open today. And the reason is you have a gap down. You have so the short-term price action is weak, but the long-term chart is showing some support. So you're going to get basically some conflicting signals on what's going down. So I think our plan for today that we've got to be rolling with is like we're going to have to try to probably long this market right off at the open as long as the morning lows hold. If the morning lows hold, we'll flip to the long side for a hot second. And then once the market pushes up, right, and you fill some of the gap, then we'll have to see. We've seen this song and dance a million times. When the market comes in, fails the gap, like people will start trying to play for like a red to green, and then you start to watch for a little bit of action on the fizzle, and then we'll see if it rolls over or if it just starts to go and goes red to green. We don't necessarily know, so we'll have to just kind of watch the action on this. These bigger gap days are very tricky to trade because it sucks a lot of the range on it. Like normally, if I saw a little bit of a gap down on the market because the market was getting so extended, right, we would be just balls deep shorting everything. But we can't now because the gap was almost too big. So it looks like a big portion of kind of what's going down here right now is, like FSLY had some earnings out, or they pre-announced their earnings. So now you're getting a little bit of sell pressure, in particular, tech names in itself. Like if you look at the SPY, the gap is about 1%, so it's still a decent sized gap down, but the QQQs is a lot more. So you got 1.5%, and this FSLY, which has been like the hot momentum stock that we've been trading nonstop. We've been trading nonstop over the the last couple I don't know months. Oh yeah, see like now this chart is broken. So what's essentially happened is they've kind of come in and warned that they're gonna be missing some revenues on their earnings. So now you're kind of coming back down into this range that it's been really in for a long time. Even though it looks nasty because it's down 30%, like if anybody's holding this, like it'd obviously be very painful. But in the scheme of things, like you're only giving back, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8 days worth of gains. So it's like sometimes like you see a like a nasty thing and you're like, fuck, this is the end of it. But it's not really. We just gave back like a week's gains on it, and we'll see kind of, what happens. But that's not really, I'm not going to try to bounce this thing. I don't believe. Like it's, this chart has been broken at this point. But I do think we'll have to if we need some shorts, this is where we're going with this. Peloton, it's opening down 2%. I won't short this right off at the open. What we'll have to see is if the market pops up and then fizzles back. We don't want to chase any of this stuff down, right? We don't want to chase any of this stuff down. But I think on the chopping block, you got to put in Peloton. If the market's going to get nasty today, then you got to put in Peloton at top of the list. Oh, yeah. Got to, right? Got to put Peloton at top of the list. JKS is number 2 on the list. You can see here the distance from where it closed yesterday and where the 9 EMA was is like $10. So that's going to be something that also, is on the chopping block. Now, if you can see here, like you're down 4% right off at the open. So you can't really short that into the hole unless you just saw like a surefire, it have to be a surefire ORB or quick pullback buy. Now, usually when you get like that kind of big down day, the quick pullback buy, like, let it pop into its EMAs, that's usually, a little bit of a better play. So that is, that's something to just kind of be mindful. So I think both of those we got to put on the chopping block. I had this net also. I was ready to short this little piggy, but like, see this? Like it's already gapped down 10%. So there's not much you can do on this one. But if this thing also starts to squeeze, I think you actually play for a long on it till you start filling the gap, and then we'll start to see like what starts to happen on this, because this thing's got a lot of heat on it. Nio's still holding up. So Nio had a big day yesterday. First of all, you had a nice clean ORB. If anybody's traded Nio, like it's one of those stocks, like when you're in it, it always feels like it's slow, and then it just starts to just go, bajonkers. And man, like this thing is, I think that this thing, we'll probably get a day 2 out of this, but it is on the top of the list. If it starts to get really parabolic, like you're into 28, 29, 30, I think, we probably try to take this down. But if we get any kind of weakness on this, I do think it gets bought up. It's a big breakout yesterday. This ZM is sitting on the 9 EMA. It already started bouncing pre-market, which is like highly annoying. I was hoping to hit this thing right off at the open. This thing actually probably goes red to green today. It would have been much nicer if it held its gap down, so we would have had a little bit of room to kind of shred this thing back to the high side. But it's not waiting for us. But I would keep that on watch too. Tesla's another one. Like you had a big day yesterday. Now you've opened down like from 460. It closed about 460s. And then, you're opening, you got down to about 440, so you get back 20 points. Now you're at 450. I keep an eye on this one for a red to green too. If the market starts to rip back today, Tesla, ZM, both of those are going to have a chance to get going. They both got a good look to them. So I think you can try to bounce both of those bad boys. Hey, Marina, how come you're not in the chat room? What's going on? Why are you double teaming? Nio's going to be fine. Now let's take a look at the earnings plays before we kind of finish out the rest of the watch list. Hey Noah, what's up, baby? How are you? Folks, and oh man, so this SPI's got some news out. As you guys know, this was the one that went from like $1 to $50 a couple weeks ago. You've been really tightening up the range here, and you can see like this thing is already starting to push. No small caps for me. That is something probably. It's got 17 million shares in volume. If you got to play these little guys, yeah, that might be in play. We know this thing's got a history of making moves. HPP junk. Let's see here. Man, this, what? I've been watching this ARWR for a while for this range break. The liquidity's just been awful on it. UVXY turd. Alright, so there's really no good gappers today. So it looks like SPAC just had some push out of somewhere. Not too much, man. It's a little bit of volume. 400,000, 600,000. Interesting enough. So out of all the electric vehicle companies, SPAC is probably the biggest turd out of the group. But it has been holding this support really well. You've got like a range break here. You got a range break there. I'd set an alert there. Like something like this, like it could get going. Like I said, this is like a monster cock turd, but if it comes out of this range, you could. I mean, it's got a history of making some move, all right? So if you look here, like if you draw your trend line, if you break this 15, you've got enough push to get this thing at least at the top of the trend line. That would be the third test, and then, you'd have to see what would happen. But that one looks pretty good. Electric vehicles, guys, electric vehicle companies were hot yesterday. Right? Tesla was good. Even HYLN, had like a momentarily lapse in its selling. And it looks like on HYLN, because they've got, I think their lockup is almost done in a little bit. So they got somebody, the warrant holders shortened this thing for a little bit. But this one is going to probably even out at some point. FUV was another one that was starting to cook yesterday. I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing go red to green. So you have all sorts of action on the electric vehicle companies, starting with NIO, right? NIO kind of started the run on them. And then what started to happen is they started getting, picked off one after another, at least on the smaller companies. And Tesla was running too. So good timing on all of them. Peloton's sued by Nordic Track. Yeah, Nordic Track's just probably jealous. They've been making nice bikes for like 50 years. What's their market cap? Like 20 mil. Oh, yeah. Now, if we need another bounce, run. I wouldn't chase this one up at the open because it's already bounced a little bit pre-market. If this thing drifts lower, we start to hold around anywhere from 59 to 60. I think we shred this thing long. We've had a nice push from 63 down to 60. Like, I think we got to bounce this thing. It's pretty hot. Oh, yeah. So, bounce watches, ZM, Run, Tesla. Good. Oh, yeah. Those are going to be our main bounce watches, I believe. Yeah, add ZM. I think we'll be good to go. That's, if this thing goes red to green, we got to try it. Marina, you're in 2 different webinars at the same time? That is very ambitious. Peloton. Yeah, I think this thing's got a fade in it. I just won't chase this thing down. Like, if it pops up at the open and starts to fizzle out, then I think we're good on it. But otherwise, we got to leave it alone. Lou, this FSOI probably, if it squeezes at the open, I think we got to short it. The chart's been busted at this point. You can't short it into the hole down 30%. But if it squeezes even like $3-4 at the open, we'll take this thing down. Spot looks okay. You are sitting on some support here, but it's mostly kind of like range life. Not my exact cup of tea. And one of the reasons it just trades really illiquid, but you have had like a nice kind of easygoing pullback, so I think you should be okay on it. I'd give it a whirl. If it holds, like if you get a confirmation candle here, this starts to hold, I think you'll be good to go. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we don't need much today. We don't need much today. We'll have a much probably shorter list than normal. So let's just talk about priorities. Run, NIO, FSLR, JKS, ZM, Peloton. Those are the priorities for us. The plan is, because the market is sitting on support, nibble on some longs at the open if we see the setup. Only if we see the setup, right? You don't just buy at the open blindly, but you got to wait about a minute or two, start to see if you hold support, then you take a stab, right? You take a starter. It starts to build, you take another one. It starts to ORB, you go balls deep on it. Then as you start to bounce, you start shredding off into resistance spots, and then you start to look for a fade. The reason, when you get conflicting signals, so you have a massive uptrend in the market, but now you got this big gap down. That's a confliction, right? You're not aligning on both time frames. So what's going to happen is on a day like today, you're going to be long, short a couple times. There's no linear type of trade on a day like today, but that's okay. That's okay. We're going to have more than enough shredders. If the market starts to rip, like look at some of these stocks like D-Dog and stuff, they've come back a decent way. Like we'll have more than enough. We're going to have more than enough fun. When I'm intraday trading, Ryan, I'm using usually 5-minute charts. Well, not usually. I'm using 5-minute charts. Every blue moon, I might switch to a 2-minute chart, but I've had almost no success with it. I don't know why I keep trying it. Every blue moon, I'll try to switch to a 2-minute chart, but it never works. Hey, Vinny, what's up, baby? Yeah, the 2-minute chart makes me overtrade, but also because I like to get bigger chunk plays. Like if you're like really scalpy, you're Scalpy McGee. If you're going to be Scalpy McGee, you can probably use a 2-minute chart. But like if you're trying to like take like a chunk out of a stock, right? Like really put your imprint on it, right? Then it's just hard to use like a 1 minute chart or something like that because you just scalp. Oh yeah. You don't want to be Scalpy McGee, do you? You want nice wins. Niles. We'll see. One thing with Nio, by the way, is like it's usually, the first pullback on Nio always, like when it's trending, the first pullback always works on that. Ryan, you could use 10-minute, especially if the day starts to progress a little bit. You could definitely give it a try. Well, that's the list. We don't need much today. When the market's opening down, you want to get rid of kind of all the fluffy plays that are going to have lack of liquidity and just stick with the big, just stick with a handful. This crowd might bounce, though. You sit right in the 20 SMA. I'm playing for a bounce, and then we try to fade later, probably. I'm not sure if we have to. Play for bounce, fade later. But we'll only hit the bounce if we start to see what we need to see. That's the list. I'm sticking to it. BBY, let me see. Yeah, you can add SPAC to the list, but it usually trades a little bit thin. If the market's gonna be volatile, I don't wanna mess around with it. BBW? Oh, shit. Yeah, it looks all right. I mean, retail stocks are notoriously a little bit more finicky. You've got it. It's overbought. I mean, you got some levels to match it off of. So I definitely think I would put that on the list. Yeah, it's got actually a much better range than it used to. ARK-AT, probably not, because it's just sitting in range. It's like how much... It doesn't look like it's one of those stocks that's got upside or downside. I'd probably just leave that alone. I'd stick with the ones that we're talking about. If you need to add some of these, like Axel or SPI, if you, feeling frisky, go for it. Just manage your risk. That's the list. I'm sticking to it.